No one in the village remembered exactly when the old woman had arrived. Some said she had walked down from the northern mountains during a winter storm 50 years ago. Others claimed she had always lived beyond the black pines, in the crooked stone house that appeared and disappeared with the seasons. Children were warned never to follow the narrow trail that climbed into the forest, and adults pretended they had no reason to be curious about what waited at its end. Her name was Ilara Vey, though almost nobody used it. To the villagers, she was simply the old wizard. She was not a wizard in the way the old stories described them. She did not wear bright robes or carry a polished staff topped with a glowing crystal. Ilara wore a long gray coat, worn leather boots, and a collection of silver rings that seemed to move from finger to finger when no one was looking. Her hair was white as frost, usually tied loosely behind her head, and her eyes were an unsettling shade of amber. She lived alone in a house built from dark stone, surrounded by dead trees that never seemed to fall. Inside, shelves covered nearly every wall, crowded with books, bottles, bones, maps, clocks, and objects whose purposes had long been forgotten by ordinary men. The house had no servants, no animals, and no visitors, yet every evening a second chair appeared beside the fireplace. Ilara never explained why. On the night everything began, she was sitting in that chair, staring into the flames. Rain struck the windows with such violence that the glass trembled in its frames. Somewhere beneath the floor, an old mechanism began to turn. Tick. 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 Ilara slowly lifted her head. For the first time in 30 years, the house had spoken to her. She rose without hesitation and walked toward the cellar door. The key hanging around her neck felt warm against her skin. She had buried that key beneath a grave in a forgotten cemetery decades earlier. She had believed it was impossible for anyone to find it. Apparently, she had been wrong. At the bottom of the stairs stood a circular iron door that had not existed that morning. Strange symbols covered its surface, carved so deeply that blackness filled the cuts. Ilara placed her palm against the metal. A voice whispered from the other side. "You promised you would never return." Ilara closed her eyes. She recognized the voice immediately. It belonged to someone who had been dead for 42 years. "I promised I would never open the door," she whispered. "That is not the same thing." The iron door unlocked by itself. Beyond it was not another room, but a long corridor descending into darkness. Cold air rushed past her, carrying the smell of wet earth and something older, something that made the bones in her hands ache. Ilara took a lantern from the wall and stepped forward. Behind her, the door slammed shut. She did not turn around. Halfway down the corridor, she found the first body. It was not human. The creature lay curled against the stone, covered in black feathers, with long fingers and a face that seemed unfinished, as though someone had begun sculpting a human skull and abandoned the work. Ilara crouched beside it and touched one of its fingers. "Still warm." "So," she murmured. "You finally came back." The creature opened one golden eye. Its lips moved without sound. Then, from somewhere far below, a bell began to ring. Once. Twice. 3 times. Ilara stood slowly. Fear had not visited her in many years, but now she felt its familiar hand tightening around her heart. She lifted the lantern and looked into the endless darkness ahead. "I was hoping," she said quietly, "that I would die before this day arrived." The bell rang a fourth time. The walls began to shake. Dust fell from the ceiling. And deep beneath the old house, something enormous took its first breath in 42 years. The bell stopped ringing, but the silence that followed was worse than the sound itself. Elara stood motionless in the dark corridor, holding the lantern with one hand while the other rested against the silver pendant beneath her coat. The creature beside her had disappeared. Only a smear of black blood remained on the stone where it had been lying. Elara looked toward the darkness ahead and understood that whatever had awakened beneath her house was no longer sleeping. She continued down the corridor. With every step, the air became colder, yet her skin felt strangely warm. Memories she had spent decades burying began to rise inside her mind. A young man laughing beneath a summer moon. A tower burning against a red sky. A woman screaming her name. A child standing alone beside a river. Elara clenched her jaw and forced the images away. She had learned long ago that magic did not forget. It merely waited. At the end of the corridor, she found a circular chamber illuminated by dozens of candles. None of them had been lit by human hands. In the center stood a stone table, and on that table rested a book bound in dark leather. Elara recognized it immediately. The Book of Names. She had watched it burn 42 years earlier. She had personally thrown it into the flames. Yet there it was, untouched by time. She approached cautiously. The moment her fingers touched the cover, every candle went out. A voice spoke behind her. "You look older." Elara froze. She did not turn around. "And you look exactly the same," she replied. A man stepped from the darkness. He appeared to be in his 30s, with black hair, pale skin, and a narrow scar running from his left eyebrow to his cheek. His clothes were old-fashioned, but perfectly preserved. His eyes were the same golden color as those of the creature in the corridor. Elara finally turned toward him. "You are dead," she said. The man smiled. "So are you, according to the records." Elara felt the room tighten around her. "What do you want?" "The same thing I wanted when you betrayed me." "That was not betrayal. You locked me beneath the earth. Because you were going to destroy the kingdom. Because I refused to let the kingdom destroy itself." Elara stared at him. For a moment she saw the young man he had once been, standing beside her in the royal library, arguing about magic until sunrise. They had been students together. Friends first. Lovers later. Enemies eventually. His name was Kalen Vey. The last person Elara had ever loved. The first person she had ever killed. She had spent 42 years believing she had destroyed him. Now he stood before her with a smile that contained no warmth. "Why now?" she whispered. Kalen looked toward the Book of Names. "Because someone has opened the first gate." Elara's expression changed. "Impossible. You taught me never to use that word." He stepped closer. "The old king is dead. The new king knows nothing. The northern mountains are waking. And beneath this land, Something older than both of us has begun to move. Elara looked down at the book. Its cover had begun to pulse like a heartbeat. Who opened it? She asked. Kaelin smiled again. You did. Elara shook her head. I have not performed that ritual in 42 years. Not intentionally. The book opened by itself. Pages turned rapidly until they stopped at a single blank page. Slowly, black letters appeared across it. Elara watched as her own name was written in ink that seemed to bleed through the paper. Then another name appeared beneath it. Kaelin's. Then a third name. Elara's face went pale. She knew that name. She had spent half a century trying to forget it. No, she whispered. Kaelin's smile disappeared. She is alive. Far above them, thunder shook the old house. In the distant village, every dog began to howl at once. And somewhere beyond the forest, a woman who had been missing for 42 years opened her eyes and whispered the old wizard's name. By the way, guys, I'd be grateful if you could like the video and subscribe to my channel. Now let's get back to the story. The rain had stopped before dawn, but the forest remained wet and silent. Elara stood outside the old stone house, watching a thin mist crawl between the black pines. She had not slept. Kaelin was gone, the book of names was gone, and the corridor beneath the house had vanished as if it had never existed. Only one thing remained from the previous night. A single black feather lying on the doorstep. Elara picked it up and immediately felt a pulse of magic running through her fingers. It was not Kaelin's magic. It was older. Much older. She placed the feather inside a small glass container and locked it with 3 separate spells. Then she looked toward the village. For 42 years she had avoided the people who lived there. She had watched generations grow old while remaining almost unchanged herself. She had accepted their fear and their rumors because fear was easier than truth. But now someone had returned, and if the name in the Book of Names was correct, the past was coming for her. Elara walked down the mountain before sunrise. By the time she reached the village, the first bells were ringing. Villagers gathered in the square, speaking in frightened voices. No one noticed her at first. Then an old man turned and dropped the basket he was carrying. The wizard, he whispered. Conversation died immediately. Elara ignored them and entered the small inn near the square. The innkeeper, a broad woman named Mara, stared at her as though she had seen a ghost. You came down, Mara said. I need information. You always need something when you come here. Have you seen a stranger? Mara hesitated. What kind? A woman. There are many women in the village. This one has white hair. Mara's face changed. She came yesterday. Elara's heart stopped for a moment. Where is she? She asked about you. What did she say? Mara lowered her voice. She said she was your sister. Elara stepped backward. I have no sister. Mara looked toward the window. That is what I told her. A cold wind passed through the inn despite the closed doors. Every candle flame bent toward the entrance. Elara turned. No one was there. Then she heard a woman's voice behind her. Still lying to yourself, Elara. She slowly looked toward the staircase. A woman stood there. She appeared to be around 60, perhaps older, with long white hair falling over her shoulders. Her face was thin and pale, but her eyes were unmistakable. Amber. The same amber eyes Elara had seen in the mirror for decades. Saren, Elara whispered. The woman smiled. You remember. I watched you die. You watched someone die. I buried you. You buried the wrong woman. The villagers had begun moving toward the doors, desperate to escape. Elara raised one hand. Stay. Her voice carried a spell that made every person in the room freeze. Saren laughed softly. Still controlling everyone around you. What are you? Elara asked. Saren descended the stairs slowly. You really do not know. Tell me. I am what you left behind. Elara's expression hardened. I left nothing behind. Saren stopped only a few steps away. You took my magic. Silence filled the inn. Elara remembered the night 42 years earlier. She remembered the fire. She remembered Kaelin. She remembered the ritual beneath the royal palace. She remembered a woman screaming while the power was pulled from her body and forced into another vessel. But she had never allowed herself to remember whose body had been on the altar. It was supposed to save you. Elara whispered. Saren's smile vanished. It was supposed to save the kingdom. Elara looked at her hands. The magic was killing you. So you stole it. You would have died. Instead, I lived without a soul. Elara felt something cold move through her chest. Saren leaned closer. And now I have come to collect what you took. Before Elara could answer, every window in the inn shattered at once. Outside, the villagers screamed. The sky above the square had turned completely black, though the sun had risen only minutes earlier. Something enormous moved behind the clouds. Saren looked upward with an expression that was almost joyful. It has found us, she said. Elara stepped outside and saw a vast shape forming above the village. Wings stretched across the sky, blotting out the morning. The creature descended slowly, and its shadow covered every house. For the first time in decades, the villagers saw the old wizard raise both hands and prepare to use magic openly. Run, Elara commanded. Do not look back. But before anyone could move, a deep voice echoed across the village. Elara Vey. The ancient creature had spoken. Your debt is due. Elara looked at Saren. Saren looked back at her. And in that moment, Elara understood the terrible truth. Saren had not returned to take her magic. She had returned because she was the only person who could stop what was coming. The creature above the village remained motionless, its enormous wings spread across the black sky. It had no visible face, only two pale lights where eyes should have been, burning through the clouds like distant moons. Elara stood in the center of the square while frightened villagers crowded behind the buildings. Saren remained beside her, strangely calm. You knew this would happen, Elara said. I knew it would come eventually, Saren replied. There is a difference. You could have warned me. Saren laughed quietly. Would you have listened? Elara did not answer. She knew the truth. 42 years ago, she had believed knowledge was dangerous when placed in the wrong hands. She had convinced herself that only she could make the necessary decisions. That belief had destroyed nearly everyone she loved. The creature descended lower. The air became heavy, and several villagers collapsed to their knees. Elara raised her hands and whispered an ancient spell. A circle of silver light appeared around the village. The creature struck the barrier with one enormous wing. The impact sounded like thunder. Cracks appeared across the magical shield. Elara gritted her teeth. I cannot hold it for long. Saren stepped forward. You are still using the old method. It worked before. No. It only delayed the inevitable. Saren placed her palm against the barrier. The cracks immediately stopped spreading. Elara stared at her. Your magic. What remains of it? How much did I take? Saren looked at her for several seconds. Almost everything. Elara lowered her eyes. I am sorry. Saren's expression hardened. Do not say that unless you are ready to pay. Another impact shook the village. The barrier began to collapse. Elara turned toward the old road leading out of town. There is a ritual beneath the northern chapel. Saren looked surprised. You remember. I remember everything now. Then you remember what the ritual requires. Elara nodded. 2 bloodlines. 1 sacrifice. And which one will you choose? Elara looked directly into Saren's eyes. Neither. They ran toward the chapel. Behind them, the barrier shattered. The creature descended into the village, but instead of attacking the people, it landed in the square and folded its wings. The ground cracked beneath its weight. Elara and Saren reached the chapel and pushed open the ancient doors. Dust filled the air. The building had been abandoned for decades, yet candles suddenly ignited along the walls as they entered. Beneath the altar, Elara found the hidden staircase. You sealed this place, Saren said. Yes. Why? Because Kalen wanted to use it. Kalen is alive. I know. Saren stopped walking. Then you understand what that means. He needs me. No. He needs both of us. They descended into darkness. At the bottom waited a circular chamber containing an enormous stone mirror. Its surface was black and perfectly still. Elara approached it cautiously. The mirror showed no reflection. Instead, it showed a city burning beneath a red moon. Towers collapsed. Rivers boiled. People ran through streets filled with shadows. At the center of the destruction stood Kalen. Beside him was a young girl. Elara recognized the girl immediately. Who is she? Saren asked. Elara could barely speak. My daughter. Saren turned sharply. You had a daughter. I thought she died. The image changed. The girl looked directly through the mirror, directly at Elara. She had white hair and amber eyes. Then she smiled. The mirror went dark. A voice echoed through the chamber. You should have come sooner. Kalen stepped from the shadows. He looked older now. His face was no longer that of a young man. For the first time, Elara saw the centuries hidden beneath his magic. "Where is she?" Elara demanded. Kalen smiled sadly. "Safe." "Where?" "Beyond the first gate." Saren raised her hand, but Kalen stopped her with a gesture. "If you kill me, she dies." Elara stared at him. "You are lying." "I wish I were." He walked toward the stone mirror. "The girl was born with something neither of you understands. She is not merely a witch. She is a doorway." Saren's face went pale. "No." Kalen looked at her. "Yes." Elara stepped closer. "What is behind the gate?" Kalen's expression became serious. "The first magic." The chamber trembled. Above them, something roared. Dust fell from the ceiling. Kalen turned toward the staircase. "We have very little time." Elara looked at Saren. For 42 years, she had believed her greatest mistake was failing to save Kalen. Now she realized the truth was much worse. Her greatest mistake had been believing the story was over. "Take us to the gate," she said. Kalen smiled. "I knew you would finally understand." The stone mirror opened like a door. Beyond it was a world covered in endless darkness. And somewhere inside that darkness, a young woman whispered, "Mother." Elara stepped through the stone mirror and immediately felt the world change around her. The air was cold, but there was no wind. The ground beneath her boots looked like black glass, reflecting a sky filled with unfamiliar stars. Saren followed close behind, while Kalen remained at the threshold for several seconds before crossing. The mirror disappeared the moment he entered. There was no path back. Elara looked around. "Where are we?" Kalen answered quietly. "The place before magic had a name." "There was a time before magic?" Saren asked. "There was a time before humans understood what magic was." Kalen pointed toward the horizon. A massive mountain rose from the darkness, but it seemed to float above the ground rather than rest upon it. Rivers of pale light flowed down its sides and vanished into the black earth. "That is the first gate," he said. "The girl is inside." Elara began walking. Every step created a faint echo, although the landscape was completely open. After several minutes, she noticed shadows moving beneath the glass-like ground. Some resembled animals. Others resembled people. One shadow followed her movements exactly. "Do not look down," Kalen warned. Elara ignored him. The shadow beneath her had her face. It smiled when she did not. She quickly looked away. "What are those?" Saren asked. "Memories," Kalen said. "Memories that never belonged to anyone." They continued until they reached a narrow bridge suspended over a vast emptiness. At the other end stood a black archway covered in symbols. Elara recognized some of them. They were older than any language she had studied. "The gate," she whispered. Kalen nodded. "Once we cross, there is no protection from what lives inside." Saren stepped beside Elara. "You said the girl is a doorway." "She is." Why? Kaelin looked at Elara. Because of what you did. Elara's face hardened. Do not blame her for my choices. I am not blaming her. I am explaining why she exists. He pointed toward Elara's chest. When you took Saren's magic, you needed somewhere to put it. Your body could not contain that much power. So you created a vessel. Elara slowly understood. The child. Yes. Saren stared at her with disbelief. You used your unborn daughter as a vessel. Elara closed her eyes. Memories flooded through her. A hidden room. A ritual circle. Kaelin begging her to stop. Saren screaming. Her own hands covered in silver light. She remembered believing she was saving everyone. She remembered feeling certain she was right. I did not know, she whispered. Saren's voice was cold. You never knew anything. You only believed you did. Before Elara could answer, the archway opened. A young woman stood beyond it. She had long white hair, pale skin, and the same amber eyes as Elara and Saren. She appeared to be around 25 years old, although something about her presence felt ancient. She looked at Elara for a long time. Mother, she said. Elara could not move. What is your name? The girl asked. Elara swallowed. I called you Leora. The girl smiled sadly. You called me many things. Saren stepped forward. Leora. The girl turned toward her. Aunt Saren. Saren's eyes filled with tears. You know me. I know everything that happened. Then you know I never wanted this. I know. Leora walked closer to Elara. But I also know what you did afterward. Elara lowered her head. I searched for you. No. Leora's voice remained calm. You searched for the spell that could erase your guilt. Elara looked up. Leora's expression softened slightly. You never came looking for me. The words hurt more than any curse could have. Kaelin stepped forward. We need to leave. Leora turned toward him. You cannot leave. Why? Because the first gate has already opened. The ground began to shake. A deep sound rolled through the darkness, like something enormous awakening beneath the earth. Leora looked at Elara. It knows you are here. What knows? Elara asked. Leora looked toward the mountain. The thing that created magic. A crack appeared across the black sky. Pale light poured through it. Saren grabbed Elara's arm. We have to go. Leora shook her head. There is nowhere to go. From the mountain came a voice so vast that it seemed to speak from every direction at once. Elara Vey. Elara felt her blood turn cold. You stole what belonged to me. The darkness began to move. Now return it. Leora stepped between her mother and the approaching shadow. No, she said. She will not. The voice became silent. Then the entire world trembled. Leora looked back at Elara. You wanted to know why I was born. Her eyes began to glow. Now you are going to learn why I was chosen. Leora raised both hands, and the darkness around the mountain suddenly stopped moving. For a few seconds, everything was completely still. Even the pale rivers of light flowing down the mountain became motionless. Elara stared at her daughter with a mixture of fear and wonder. She had spent 42 years imagining what Leora might have become, but she had never imagined this. "You are stronger than I was," Elara whispered. Leora shook her head. "Strength has nothing to do with it." She looked toward the mountain. "It listens to me because it recognizes itself." Kalen stepped forward. "Then you can close the gate." Leora looked at him. "I can. Do it. And trap all three of us here forever." Kalen's expression changed. "There must be another way. There is always another way. You simply do not like the price." Elara approached her daughter. "What price?" Leora looked at her mother for a long time. "You." Elara understood immediately. "My life." "Not exactly." Leora pointed toward Elara's chest. "Your magic." Elara touched the silver pendant beneath her coat. "I can give it to you." "No. You can give it back." Saren stepped closer. "Back to whom?" Leora looked toward the mountain. "To the one who gave it to us." A low rumble moved beneath their feet. Kalen's face became pale. "If we return the magic, every spell created from it will disappear." Elara looked at him. "Including yours." "And yours." Saren added quietly. "And mine." Leora nodded. "The world beyond the gate will survive. But every magical bloodline will become ordinary." Elara thought of the village, the kingdom, the countless people who had built their lives around magic. "They will hate us." "Perhaps," Leora said. "But they will live." Suddenly, the darkness above them split open. A vast eye appeared in the sky. It was larger than the mountain itself. The eye had no pupil, only a circle of white fire surrounded by darkness. The voice returned. "Return what was stolen." Elara looked at Saren. "If I do this, will it heal you?" Saren did not answer immediately. "No," she said. "But it may finally allow me to become someone who does not belong to your mistake." Elara nodded slowly. "Then I know what I must do." Kalen stepped toward her. "Elara." She looked at him. For the first time, there was no anger between them. Only exhaustion. "I am sorry," she said. Kalen smiled sadly. "I know. You should have killed me when you had the chance. I loved you. That was your weakness." "No," he replied. "That was mine and yours." Elara turned toward Leora. "Tell me how." Leora took her mother's hands. The moment their palms touched, Elara felt an unbearable heat rush through her body. Memories began pouring out of her. Every spell she had ever cast. Every life she had saved. Every life she had destroyed. Every secret she had buried. She saw herself as a young woman. Fearless and arrogant. She saw Saren before the ritual, laughing beside a river. She saw Kalen holding her hand beneath the stars. She saw Leora as an infant, sleeping peacefully while ancient magic burned inside her. Elara began to cry. "I remember," she whispered. "I remember everything." Leora held her tighter. "Good." The ground beneath them opened. A circle of white fire appeared around the four of them. Kaelin stepped outside the circle. Saren did the same. "You cannot stay," Leora told them. "When the ritual begins, the gate will choose what belongs to this world and what belongs beyond it." Kaelin looked at Elara. "What about you?" "I belong to both." He understood what she meant. "Then perhaps you will be the bridge." Elara closed her eyes. Leora began speaking in a language older than human speech. The mountain answered. The sky filled with light. Every magical object in the distant world began to crack. Wands shattered. Enchanted swords lost their glow. Ancient spells collapsed. The power inside Elara's body began to leave her. It did not hurt as much as she expected. Instead, she felt lighter. For the first time in centuries, she felt human. The enormous eye above them began to close. The voice spoke one final time. "What is taken must be returned." Elara opened her eyes. "Then take it." A brilliant wave of light exploded from the circle. Kaelin disappeared first. Saren vanished next. Leora remained. She looked at her mother with tears in her eyes. "You are free now." Elara smiled weakly. "So are you." The gate began to close. Leora pushed Elara backward. "Go." "No. Mother." Elara grabbed her daughter's hand. "I will not leave you again." Leora smiled. "You already did once. You do not get to do it twice." With one final movement, Leora pushed Elara through the gate. The world disappeared behind her. The last thing Elara saw was her daughter standing alone before the first magic as the gate closed between them. Then everything became dark. When Elara opened her eyes, she was lying on the floor of her old stone house. Morning sunlight entered through the windows. The silver rings on her fingers were dull. The pendant around her neck was cold. She tried to summon a flame with her hand. Nothing happened. For the first time in her life, the old wizard could no longer perform magic. She sat quietly beside the fireplace and listened to the silence. Then someone knocked on the door. The knock came again, 3 slow blows against the old wooden door. Elara remained seated beside the dead fireplace, staring at her empty hands. For the first time in more than a century, she could feel the weight of her own body without magic moving beneath her skin. She stood carefully and walked toward the door. Every step felt strangely ordinary. When she opened it, she found an old man standing on the porch. He wore a dark traveling coat and carried a wooden walking stick. His face was unfamiliar, but his eyes were not. They were the same amber color she had seen in Leora, Saren, and herself. Elara immediately reached for the knife hidden beneath her coat. The old man smiled. "If I wanted you dead, you would not have heard me knock." Elara narrowed her eyes. "Who are you?" "My name is Tomas." "That tells me nothing." "It should." He looked past her into the house. You have lived here long enough to know that names matter. Elara slowly lowered the knife. You are a wizard. Tomas laughed. Not anymore. Those words struck her harder than she expected. She stepped aside and allowed him inside. Tomas walked directly toward the fireplace and examined the empty hearth. So it is true. What? The magic is gone. Elara nodded. All of it. Not all. She looked at him sharply. What do you mean? Tomas touched the stone above the fireplace. The oldest magic is never truly destroyed. Elara felt a familiar coldness move through the room, but it was not magic. It was instinct. You were there. Where? At the first gate. Tomas smiled. No. But someone sent me. Elara immediately thought of Leora. My daughter. Tomas shook his head. Not exactly. He removed a small piece of black glass from his pocket. It was the same material as the stone mirror beneath the chapel. Elara stared at it. The gate is closed. For you. What does that mean? It means Leora did not close it from the inside. Elara felt her stomach tighten. Then what happened? Tomas placed the glass on the table. A faint image appeared inside it. Leora was standing in darkness. She looked frightened. She is trapped. Elara took a step forward. Where? Between worlds. Can she return? Tomas hesitated. Perhaps. What do you need? You. Elara laughed bitterly. I have no magic. Exactly. He looked at her with unusual seriousness. The gate will not open for a wizard. It will open for someone who has lost magic. Elara stared at the image. Leora suddenly turned toward them as though she could see through the glass. Her lips moved. No sound came from the stone. Tomas leaned closer. What did she say? Elara listened carefully. Then she understood. She said, do not trust him. Tomas became completely still. Elara slowly stepped backward. Who are you really? Tomas sighed. I was hoping she would not remember me. His face began to change. The wrinkles disappeared. His back straightened. His gray hair darkened. Within seconds, the old man had become a young man with pale skin and golden eyes. Elara knew him immediately. Kalen. He smiled. Hello, Elara. She raised the knife again. You died. I did. I watched you disappear. That was another version of me. Elara's hand trembled. How many versions are there? Kalen looked toward the black glass. Enough. What do you want? To bring Leora back. Why? Because she is the only one who can restore what we lost. Elara's expression hardened. You want magic back. I want balance. That is what you called it before you nearly destroyed the kingdom. Kalen stepped closer. The world without magic is already dying. How? You have not noticed. He pointed toward the window. Outside, the forest was changing. Leaves were turning gray. Birds lay motionless beneath the trees. The distant mountains were covered in unnatural mist. When the first magic was returned, it did not simply disappear. It was disconnected from this world. Everything that depended on it is collapsing. Elara looked outside. Then we made a mistake. Yes. And Leora is the answer. She is the bridge. Elara shook her head. No. She is my daughter. Kalen's expression softened. That is why you must choose carefully. He picked up the black glass. If we bring her back, magic will return with her. Elara stared at him. And if I refuse? Kalen looked toward the dark forest. Then within 7 days, the world will begin to forget itself. What does that mean? People will forget their names. Families will forget one another. Cities will forget why they were built. Eventually, the world will forget how to remain a world. Elara looked down at her hands. She had spent her entire life believing magic was something people controlled. Now she understood that perhaps magic had always been controlling them. She took the black glass from Kalen. Show me the gate. Kalen smiled. I knew you would come. Elara looked at him coldly. Do not mistake this for trust. I would never make that mistake again. Outside, thunder rolled across a cloudless sky. Far away, beneath the northern mountains, a crack appeared in the earth. Something began to whisper Elara's name. This time, she heard it clearly. It was not the voice of the first magic. It was Leora's voice. Mother, hurry. By the second day, the world had begun to forget. It started with small things. A baker in the southern district forgot the recipe for bread he had used every morning for 30 years. A woman woke beside her husband and could not remember his name. Children stared at their parents as though they were strangers. In the royal library, entire books became blank overnight, while roads disappeared from maps and old statues lost the names carved into their stone. Elara and Kalen traveled north without stopping. The journey should have taken 3 days, but the land itself seemed determined to resist them. Villages they passed through had become strangely silent. People stood in the streets holding objects they could no longer identify. Some wandered aimlessly, searching for homes they could no longer remember. Elara felt helpless without magic. She had spent most of her life solving problems with a gesture, a word, or a spell. Now she had only her hands and her mind. Kalen seemed uncomfortable watching her struggle. You are slower without magic, he said. You are weaker without it, Elara replied. There is a difference. He smiled. You still argue like you did when we were young. We were fools when we were young. We were powerful. That was the problem. They continued in silence until they reached a ruined monastery beneath the northern mountains. Kalen stopped at the entrance. The gate is below us. Elara looked at the broken statues surrounding the monastery. Each statue had once represented an ancient wizard. Their faces had been scratched away. Who did this? She asked. People who survived the last war. They hated magic. They hated what people did with it. Inside the monastery, they found a staircase descending beneath the earth. At the bottom stood a circular chamber with 7 doors. 6 were made of stone. The 7th was made of black glass. Elara immediately recognized it. The first gate. Kalen shook his head. A reflection of it. Where is the real one? Inside. He touched the black glass. We need to enter together. Elara looked at him suspiciously. Why? Because the gate requires 2 people who once shared magic. We no longer have magic. Exactly. He pressed his palm against the glass. Elara placed hers beside it. The surface became warm. For a moment nothing happened. Then the black glass turned transparent. Beyond it stood Leora. She looked exhausted. Her white hair floated around her as though she were underwater. Mother, she whispered. Elara stepped forward. Leora. Do not bring him. Kalen's face tightened. You do not understand. I understand everything. Leora looked at Elara. He did not come here to save me. Elara turned toward Kalen. What did you promise her? He said nothing. Kalen. I promised to restore the magic. By using her. She is the only vessel capable of containing it. Elara shook her head. No. If we do not, the world dies. There is another way. There is always another way with you. Kalen stepped toward the gate. You have spent your entire life refusing to accept necessary sacrifices. Elara stared at him. And you have spent yours making other people pay for your decisions. Leora suddenly screamed. The black glass cracked. A shadow appeared behind her. It was enormous and shapeless, with hundreds of pale hands reaching toward her. Elara grabbed the glass. What is that? Leora looked behind her. The keeper. Kalen's expression changed. It has found her. The shadow pressed against the inside of the gate. Every door in the chamber began to shake. Elara understood that the keeper was not merely guarding the first magic. It was guarding Leora. Why does it want her? She asked. Leora answered through tears. Because I am the last thing connecting your world to the first magic. Kalen stepped backward. Then we must bring her through now. No, Elara said. We cannot. Why? Because the keeper will follow. Kalen looked at her. Then what do you suggest? Elara looked at the 7 doors. She suddenly remembered something from her earliest lessons. 7 doors. 7 choices. 1 truth. The old masters had built the chamber not to open the gate, but to hide a way around it. She walked to the first stone door. Nothing happened. Then the second. Nothing. The third. Nothing. At the 4th door, she noticed a small inscription. She wiped away the dust. Magic is not power, she read aloud. Magic is memory. Kalen stared at her. What does that mean? Elara smiled faintly. It means we have been looking in the wrong place. She turned toward Leora. Do you remember the first spell I ever taught you? Leora nodded. Yes. Say it. Leora whispered 3 ancient words. The moment she spoke them, the 6 stone doors opened simultaneously. Behind them was not darkness, but thousands of memories. Elara saw people laughing, crying, loving, fighting, forgiving. She saw every moment in which magic had been used not to control, but to remember. The keeper screamed. The chamber shook violently. Elara understood the truth. The first magic had never belonged to wizards. It belonged to memory itself. And if she could remember who she had been before becoming the old wizard, she might finally find a way to save Leora without restoring the magic that had nearly destroyed the world. She turned to Kaelin. You are going to hate what I am about to do. Kaelin looked at her. What? Elara smiled. I am going to forget you. Elara closed her eyes and took a slow breath. For 42 years, she had carried Kaelin inside her memory like a wound that refused to heal. Every argument, every promise, every betrayal, and every moment of love had remained perfectly preserved, protected by the magic she once possessed. Now she understood why the first magic had chosen memory as its foundation. Magic did not simply give people power. It gave their memories permanence. And some memories were never meant to survive forever. What are you doing? Kaelin asked. Elara opened her eyes. I am letting you go. You cannot erase me. I am not erasing you. She touched her chest. I am erasing what you mean to me. Kaelin stepped backward. If you do that, you will forget why you are fighting. No. Elara looked toward Leora. I will remember why. She began to speak the oldest spell she knew. It was not a spell of destruction or protection. It was a spell of release. As the words left her lips, memories began leaving her mind. She remembered meeting Kaelin beneath the royal library. Then the memory became faint. She remembered the first time he held her hand. It disappeared. She remembered their first kiss beneath the summer moon. Gone. She remembered their wedding. Gone. She remembered the night they fought. Gone. The night she betrayed him. Gone. The night she believed she killed him. Gone. Kaelin watched in horror. Elara, stop. She could no longer remember why his voice sounded familiar. Who are you? She asked. He looked devastated. I am Kaelin. She repeated the name quietly. It meant nothing. Then the keeper attacked. Hundreds of pale hands broke through the black glass and reached toward Leora. Elara turned toward her daughter. I remember you. Leora began to cry. That is enough. Elara stepped into the chamber of memories. Every memory around her began glowing. She saw Saren beside the river. She saw herself as a young woman. She saw Leora as a baby. She saw villages saved from famine, kingdoms destroyed by ambition, strangers helping one another in the darkest moments. She finally understood what the first magic had been trying to teach her. Power was never the foundation. Choice was. Magic merely amplified whatever already existed inside the person using it. Elara walked toward the keeper. It lowered itself until its enormous shadow covered her completely. "You cannot defeat me," it whispered. "I am older than your world." Elara looked up. "I do not need to defeat you." She raised one hand. "I only need to remember something you cannot understand." The keeper paused. "What?" "Why people choose to love even when they know they will lose." A light appeared in Elara's palm. It was not the magic she had once possessed. It was something smaller. Warmer. Human. The keeper recoiled. "That is impossible." Elara smiled. "No. It is simply something you never needed." The light expanded. Every memory in the chamber began flowing into it. The keeper screamed as the memories passed through its body. It tried to hold them, but memories were not objects. They could not be owned. They could only be lived. The shadow began to dissolve. Leora ran toward the opening. Elara reached for her daughter. Their hands touched. "Mother. I am here. You remembered me. I could never forget you." Behind them, Kalen stood motionless. Elara looked at him. She knew his name, but nothing else. Somehow, she felt sadness when she saw his face. "Why are you crying?" she asked. Kalen wiped his eyes. "Because you once loved me." Elara studied him. "Perhaps I still do." He shook his head. "You should not." "Why?" "Because love without memory is not the same." Elara smiled gently. "Maybe that is why it is real." The chamber began collapsing. The 7 doors disappeared one by one. Leora pulled her mother toward the gate. Kalen remained behind. "Come," Elara said. "We can all leave." He shook his head. "Someone has to close it." Elara suddenly remembered one thing. Not his face. Not his voice. Not their history. A feeling. The certainty that once, long ago, she had trusted him with her life. "You always choose the impossible path," she whispered. Kalen smiled. "You taught me." He placed his hand against the gate. "Take her home." Elara and Leora crossed the threshold. Behind them, the gate began to close. Kalen's final words echoed through the chamber. "Tell her I remembered." The gate vanished. The world became silent. Elara stood beneath the northern mountains with Leora beside her. The sky was beginning to brighten. Across the horizon, the grayness was disappearing. People would remember their names again. Families would recognize one another. The world had survived. But Elara felt an emptiness inside her that she could not explain. Leora took her mother's hand. "Are you all right?" Elara looked toward the rising sun. "No." Then she smiled. "But I think I will be." For the first time, she did not feel like the old wizard. She felt like an old woman who had finally been given the chance to live without magic. Years passed after the gate disappeared. The world slowly recovered from the 7 days of forgetting. Villages were rebuilt, roads were redrawn, and the empty pages of forgotten books slowly filled themselves with words again. Magic never returned. At first, people feared the change. Kings lost their enchanted weapons. Healers had to learn ordinary medicine. Farmers discovered that crops could survive without spells. Children grew up hearing stories about wizards as if they belonged to an ancient age. Some people mourned what had been lost. Others celebrated it. Elara returned to the old stone house beyond the black pines, but she was no longer feared. The villagers eventually learned that the old wizard had become simply Elara. She repaired broken chairs, grew vegetables, taught children to read, and spent long evenings beside the fireplace with a cup of tea. Her silver rings remained, but they were only silver now. Her old books remained as well, although most of the magical pages had become ordinary histories. Leora stayed with her mother for several years before traveling across the kingdom. She became a teacher, helping people understand the strange history of the world before magic disappeared. She never spoke of herself as a doorway or a vessel. To everyone she met, she was simply Leora, a young woman who had survived something no one else could understand. Sometimes she returned home during winter. She and Elara would sit beside the fire and talk until midnight. They rarely spoke about the gate. Some memories were better left untouched. Saren also returned once. She arrived one autumn afternoon carrying a basket of apples. Elara almost did not recognize her. Saren smiled. "You look older." Elara laughed. "So do you." They sat together on the porch and watched the sunset. There was no anger between them anymore. There was only the quiet understanding of two women who had lost too much and finally decided they did not need to lose anything else. "Do you ever miss it?" Saren asked. Elara knew what she meant. Magic? Yes. Elara thought for a moment. Sometimes. "Do you regret giving it away?" "Every day." Saren smiled. "And would you do it again?" Elara looked toward the forest. "Every day." Saren nodded. They never spoke of it again. One winter morning, Elara found something on her doorstep. It was a small black feather inside a glass container. She stared at it for a long time. The glass was cold. The feather was warm. Elara carried it into the house and placed it beside the fireplace. That evening, Leora returned unexpectedly. She looked at the feather and became silent. "Where did you find it?" she asked. "It was waiting outside." Leora touched the glass. "Do you know what it means?" Elara shook her head. Leora smiled. "Neither do I." They left it there. Years later, when Elara became very old, she moved into the village. She no longer wanted to live alone in the forest. The people who had once feared her now brought food to her door and sat beside her when the evenings became cold. Children sometimes asked whether the stories about the old wizard were true. Elara always smiled. "Some of them." "Did you really fight a monster?" "Yes." "Did you really have magic?" "Once." "Did you really save the world?" Elara would pause before answering. "No. I only made one good choice at the right time." One spring morning, Elara woke before sunrise. She knew immediately that her time was near. Leora was beside her bed. Elara reached for her daughter's hand. I am not afraid. Leora smiled through tears. I know. Elara looked toward the window. Outside, the first light touched the trees. For a moment, she thought she saw a young man standing among them. Black hair. Pale skin. A familiar smile. She could not remember his name. But she remembered the feeling. She closed her eyes. Tell him I remembered, she whispered. Leora squeezed her hand. I will. Elara smiled. Then she took one final breath. The old wizard was gone. But the woman remained in every person she had touched, every story she had changed, every life she had saved, and every choice she had finally learned to make without magic. Years afterward, Leora returned to the old stone house. The black pines were still there. The fireplace was cold. The shelves were covered in dust. On the table sat the small glass container with the black feather inside. Leora opened it. The feather dissolved into silver light. For a brief moment, the room became warm. A man's voice whispered from somewhere beyond the walls. She finally understood. Leora smiled. Yes. The voice faded. Outside, the forest moved gently in the wind. There were no spells anymore. No enchanted kingdoms. No ancient gates. No creatures hiding beneath the earth. There was only the ordinary world, imperfect and fragile, continuing to turn beneath an ordinary sky. And somewhere beyond what human eyes could see, perhaps the first magic was still waiting. Not to be used. Not to be conquered. Only to be remembered.